I've been painting for over 4 decades, and for the last 3 decades my focus has been landscape. I have a long-term interest in the geology of landscape and how it is shaped by the forces of nature, and this has inspired me to create my most recent body of work. I remember the first time I visited Start Point, not walking down the road to the lighthouse, but following another path to Pear Tree Point, which has a very small cove and shingle beach, and viewing the lighthouse, Start Point, on the peninsula from a distance. And that was a very interesting experience because the tide comes in pretty rapidly there, and it was a chance to make some drawings, some sketches, and get a sense of how isolated that particular spot is. The headland runs a mile out into the sea and is probably the most exposed peninsula on the English coast. We have a romantic view of lighthouses, and that stems from being a maritime nation, but it also stems from the architectural beauty of these fantastic feats of Victorian engineering. They were designed to withstand storms and gigantic waves. Sailors were the first to see them, but it was men with their feet on the ground, the architects, engineers, and builders that constructed them, and they did that over 2,000 years. The Romans were the first to build a lighthouse in Britain. It was in Dover, the Pharos. In fact, there were 2 built in Dover Harbour, because that was the main entry point of Roman fleets. Actually, I used to cycle to one of them when I was at school. I used to prop my bicycle up against the Pharos, a 2,000-year-old lighthouse, and lie back and watch the clouds and look across the channel. Henry VIII incorporated Trinity House in 1514, at a time when the increase in shipping demanded greater safety at sea. Hi Mary, I'm Jeremy.
How do you do? Welcome to Start Point. Come on in. Up we go. I hope you're counting the steps, Joe.
I am, Mary. You said there were 82?
98.
98? My goodness, so I just dealt with the first dozen.
James Walker was responsible for designing Start Point Lighthouse. He made it quite a feature down here, putting on embellishments. Instead of just designing a straight tower, he built it with these sections, and every one had this architectural detail on it. And when he got to the top of the lantern room, he built it in the Gothic style with a gallery looking like crenellations of a castle. Here we are, right at the top of the lighthouse in the lantern room. And here's our 1959 Fresnel lens. So you can see 2 lamps inside. Only one is going to work, the other is a backup. Mm-hmm. The lamps are that big. That's what's going to give you a kilowatt of power. The Fresnel lenses are going to focus it and send it out for 25 miles. And think of those beams of light moving across the sea. As that beam passes you, you think it's flashed at you. It hasn't at all. It's just moving on around. Mm-hmm. So the light stays on, The prisms are going to do the work. They are going to bend and focus the light until it leaves here, through the glass and out.
Lighthouses started appearing in my paintings in 2009. I was painting down on the Lizard Peninsula, and I realised that I'd painted 3 lighthouses while I'd been working in Cornwall. I hadn't consciously included them in the pictures, they just started to appear, and I'm naturally drawn to very precarious and dangerous locations along the coast. Geologically, they tend to be very interesting. So I decided to visit all the lighthouses in the southwest, not just in Cornwall, but in Dorset and Devon as well. Anvil Point is a very special lighthouse for me. My grandmother lived nearby in Sunnydale, and when I was a boy, I used to spend the summers with her, and we'd walk through Durlston Park and past the lighthouse, past Anvil Point. We'd go to Tillywim Caves, which are the old limestone quarries across from Anvil Point. And I can still remember the impact that the silhouette of the lighthouse had on me. It didn't matter if the sun was shining and it would be glowing against a sparkling blue sea, or if the black chimney stood out against a cold grey winter sky. The silhouette of the lighthouse always took me by surprise. Christiana Payne is an authority on coastal landscape painting. Her book, Where the Sea Meets the Land, Artists on the Coast in 19th Century Britain, is of particular interest to me. Many of the lighthouses I'm painting are from that period. So, Durlston Head and the Anvil Point Lighthouse.
Fantastic. So this is about the same date as the lighthouse?
It is. One of my favourite walks on the Isle of Purbeck starts at Durlston Castle, a folly built of Purbeck stone in 1887 by George Burt, who also owned Tillywim Quarries. Burt established the estate on the headland and made a promenade along the coast. On a good day, you can see the Isle of Wight to the south, and finally you reach Anvil Point Lighthouse.
So it's really interesting to see the painting in front of the landscape itself. It's fascinating. And I can see how a lot of the painting is topographically accurate. You know, that is the curve of the hill there, and we've got rocks down there and so on. So I can see lines in it, some of which conform to what I recognise, but there are abstract shapes as well. And I know you start with a line drawing. So how does that come about? Where does that come from?
I see the world as a series of interconnected forms, and I'm using line to capture those. It's a fast and efficient way to do that. At the moment, I'm dealing with the complex architecture of Anvil Point, so I'm able to focus in on a small area and edit, add and remove the lines that create those shapes. But in terms of the architectural forms, they're a stark contrast to the geological and natural ones that we see. Yeah. And you know, the lighthouse is really a relatively recent occurrence in the landscape. 1881 it was built. So all those elements and the memories of Tillywim Caves, which are just behind us. Yep. You know, an 18th century limestone quarry where all that freestone was taken out and shipped to London. So all those historical ideas and geological ones I'm trying to distill into the picture.
Yeah, you'll see.
After visiting the locations, I wanted to continue working outdoors, so I've assembled a marquee, and that's worked incredibly well because it's acted like a light box. It's almost as if I'm painting plein air. Travelling to the different lighthouses with some of the poplar panels that I paint on, bringing them back to the marquee, has enabled me to continue to paint them in natural light, daylight. It works really well, because at the same time I can feel the changing weather. Sometimes it's raining or the wind's blowing. It is almost like being in the lantern room of a lighthouse. It's been a very interesting experience trying this out for the first time. I can roll the walls up and down, depending on the weather. The sun moves around the marquee, lighting it from above. Even on a bright sunny day, the light is diffused. It's ideal for painting. Godrevy Lighthouse is an octagonal tower that sits on a large rock close to the mainland and marks the Stones, a dangerous reef that extends towards St Ives and on which many vessels have been wrecked. Despite its proximity to Godrevy Point, the lighthouse is open to the full force of Atlantic gales and has been a reassuring presence in St Ives Bay since it was built in 1859 by James Walker. He was also responsible for another 21 lighthouses, including Start Point and Anvil Point. Godrevy is most likely the lighthouse immortalised by Virginia Woolf in her book To the Lighthouse. Her family, when Virginia was a child, used to spend the summers at Talland House in Carbis Bay, St Ives, overlooking Godrevy Island. As a painter, I decided to visit each one of these lighthouses. Sometimes actually go inside them, but also walk around them, walk up to them, navigate the landscape they inhabit. Somebody looking at the painting for the first time may not have had that chance, so I'm trying to instill in their mind, through that particular picture, the experience of being right next to it at one minute, looking at a detail or architectural feature. Or at another, I might be relatively far away, looking back. So I also want them to feel that sense of space and atmospheric perspective. The opportunity to make this series of paintings has allowed me to explore our coastal heritage, to observe how lighthouses continue to illuminate our coastline and how they survive today as iconic structures in the landscape.